there's all sorts of stuff coming out, but in some ways it's such a drip feed, and also there's so much that it's sort of become, like Steve Bannon always advised, to sort of flood the zone with stuff, and so that nobody can quite process it all. That's what's going on here.
Sarah Baxter joining in from New York, of the Marie Colvin Centre for International Reporting. Hello to you, Sarah.
Hello, John.
Hi, welcome as always, Sarah. Joe Tanner's here, and so is Josh Glancy, all keen to share thoughts on what's going on your side of the Atlantic. Well, I'm going to start with the Epstein files, obviously, because they've been poured over, they've been gone through with fine-tooth comb since we've been on air. I mean, how many thousands of documents and photos are we talking about in this latest release? Sarah, I know you're keeping an eye on it. What's been leaping out for you?
Well, Trump's name for a start, because the first batch released on Friday said very little about Trump, and it was all about Bill Clinton. But finally, his name is coming out. I should stress, however, that although he appears in very disturbing contexts, the Department of Justice is insisting that it's all fake, or if not so much fake, containing untrue allegations. And it has to be said, there's absolutely no proof that Donald Trump did anything wrong. But one thing that leapt out was a note from Jeffrey Epstein to Larry Nassar, who people might remember is the jailed paedophile medic in charge of the US gymnastics team, who really did molest a number of girls just as their medical doctor. It was a really horrible scandal. Now, apparently, Epstein sent him a letter and said that the president, this was in 2019, and the president was Donald J. Trump, shared their interest in nubile young women. So that's pretty horrific. But of course, Epstein can say what he likes. It's not proven.
No.
For all we know, Epstein was rather obsessed with Trump and might have been wanting to land him in it.
Yeah, I mean, all of these things are possible. I suppose the problem for Donald Trump is, while these theories, unproven, false, whatever they happen to be, while they're in the air, there's going to be a lot of talk about them. And there are more of these papers to come, with many more redactions we know. So loads of scope, Sarah, for the accusation that the stuff that we have a right to know or really want to know is just being blacked out by the Ministry of Justice. And when we talk about the Ministry of Justice now, of course, the Ministry of Justice, well, for the most part, it sort of does what the president wants it to do.
It's totally wholly controlled by Donald Trump, rather than the Attorney General, in my view, who's Pam Bondi. I mean, she's very much Trump's personal choice to lead that department, and it has been magnified. So, but this constant drip feed of this picture, this allegation, this Trump thing. I mean, the FBI apparently said that Trump had been on Epstein's plane more often than they'd realized. So there's that. And at one time, it appears that he was the solo traveler on Epstein's plane with a 20-year-old woman, but not an underage woman, I should stress. So there's all sorts of stuff coming out. But in some ways, it's such a drip feed. And also there's so much that it's sort of become, like Steve Bannon always advised, to sort of flood the zone with stuff, and so that nobody can quite process it all. That's what's going on here.
Yeah. So where do we go now? There's still this stuff being combed over. Have we now seen the grabbiest bits of this latest cache, or is there more work to be done and more stuff has yet to come out over these coming hours?
Well, I don't know whether we've seen it all. I think only about 130,000 documents have been released, and there's supposed to be about 1 million of them. Yeah. So there's more where that's coming from.
There's a couple of million, I thought, that we have yet to see before it's over. We were told it was going to take a week or two, but they haven't got long. There's got to be a bigger cascade than we've seen so far.
Well, it's interesting. It's all happening practically on Christmas Eve, and we'll probably get another big dump, when it's practically the New Year, because people are at home with their families and not necessarily paying that much attention to the news. But I don't suppose, there's anything particularly nefarious in the timing. I'm just noting it's a little odd coincidence. But imagine if the boot was on the other foot. Imagine if all these, unproven allegations and looks like realistic testimony of Trump being in certain places, such as Epstein's plane, were coming out against Joe Biden or Barack Obama. Yeah. Just can you imagine the extent of the scandal? It would be unbelievable. But Trump is, past master at saying fake news, old news, nothing to see here, move along. And not surprisingly, he's been posting good economic news that's come out today, and that's his. If he can get the American economy improving, people will forgive him a lot. So who knows whether this is a blip or genuine improvement
Yeah.
in GDP in America.
Josh Clancy.
Well, I think that Sarah will remember editing the Sunday Times over Christmas, and so at least from our perspective, we're quite grateful that this is being done in the festive week, because there'll be a lot to talk about on the weekend. But no, seriously, I mean, it is quite staggering what we're seeing here, and just because we're sort of in a light-hearted mood, it is quite remarkable. I mean, the stuff about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor in Peru, going to Peru, and the seeming procurement of young women for him through some sort of intermediary in Peru. I mean, it's just extraordinary what was going on, and the fact that they were putting these things in emails as well, and using these kind of slightly odd aliases, and seeming to use these kind of odd email accounts. And again, this is all sort of alleged. We can't nail it down for certain, but it certainly seems very, very suggestive. I mean, it's just remarkable, and it just strikes me that even though the royals have now effectively done as much as they can to kind of cauterise the Andrew wound, somewhat belatedly, one might argue, it's still an open wound, because you can't sack a member of the royal family. I mean, they've done everything they can, but he remains the former Queen's son and the King's brother. So I just that strikes me as a problem that's going to keep rolling through the holiday.
And this just continues to be painful for the royal family. Obviously, the last thing on this planet. Well, maybe we haven't yet seen the worst, but I mean, the last thing that Andrew, Mr. Mountbatten Windsor, would ever wish to come out in the way that it has, Jo.
Yeah, and I think that the one thing that's really struck me out of this is the line back to the UK, and one of the threads between the UK and America, and in particular the royal family in America, is the talk of Frogmore Cottage, which you may remember was a property that was gifted to one Prince Harry and his wife, who now reside in America, and at which point may they express their concern about what may have gone on in the home that they were gifted and became their marital home, because there's a loop there that's forming, and this is a big time of year in the UK. It's going to be interesting to see, while this is going on in the States. And Sarah, I know you're obviously watching this closely, but this is the time of year where we gear up for the pictures of the royal family heading to church in the morning on Christmas Day. Our papers are always full of those images. We'll be looking to see how the King looks, how's he doing given his health. The same with the Princess of Wales, and it just strikes me that that there is this link that Trump's always had, this sort of interest in the royal family, and we've used the royal family as our, shall we call it, trump card with him. But then at the same time, we've now got a link back to a very specific property about that time, and all these other links as well as Andrew. But Andrew's the one that's been sort of kicked out. He's been pushed out. He's not in the frame anymore. But I do wonder what's going to happen, whether for instance Harry or Meghan may get asked a question that they feel inclined to answer.
Okay, well, look, Sarah, if you can stay with us, be really grateful. There's more I want to talk to you about and get your thoughts. I'm sure Joe and Josh do too. For example, the new fleet of battleships, as the president is calling them. They're destroyers. I don't think we call these ships battleships anymore. But he obviously likes the sound of the word, and he likes even more the sound of the word when they are described as Trump-class warships. The way to get the president aboard, it was suggested earlier on, was to say it's all about you, Mr. President. So we'll talk about that and the way the president is putting in place a monument to his term, which is supposed to be, according to the Constitution, his last term as president. So I want to just share your thoughts on this story, which has been bouncing around the last 24 hours. The president announcing a new generation of the most powerful warships apparently ever in the history of warships, and they are to be described as Trump-class warships. We might have guessed that was what they would be called, but how's that gone down there? Or is it just, same old pattern? What's the story? Move on.
When I hear Trump-class warships, you have to hope they don't go belly up. But really, Trump has had a mania for naming things after him as a businessman. What nobody quite anticipated was how he would pursue that passion, from Trump golf courses, Trump hotels, all the way to the sort of Trump White House, the Trump ballroom, the Trump Centre, the Trump this, the Trump that, the Trump meme coin, honestly, it's an insatiable appetite for legacy, for his name in gold letters. And the one thing I think, though, that could be his undoing on this is that he looks much more obsessed with himself than he does with American voters. And
before you move on, Sarah, before we move on from the warships, just have a listen to this. I know it's an easy target, but we couldn't resist it. This is the president announcing this new generation of warships and how they were going to come into being.
The U.S. Navy will lead the design of these ships along with me, because I'm a very aesthetic person, alongside our partners in American industry. And we're going to have Pete Hegseth and Marco and a lot of very talented people involved. But a lot of it's already been done. We've been doing this for months.
Right. So, Sarah, the new generation of warships is going to be designed obviously by naval military architects, of course, but also by him because he's a very aesthetic person.
So expect a lot of gold if the Oval Office is anything to go by. But, we're laughing about this, John, but these warships, you have to ask, first of all, are they militarily necessary? Because, with drone warfare, etc., sometimes these new vessels can be like sitting ducks. And, I started writing about that years ago as Washington correspondent for the Sunday Times, that warfare is changing. But he likes to go back in the past, Trump. The second thing is they're going to be carrying around nuclear weapons, apparently, which are generally considered to be much safer if they're in submarines. So I hope this is militarily justified and not just all about the Trump aesthetic.
It was put to me earlier on. I want to get Joe and Josh back in a second, but it was put to me earlier on by an American analyst that there may be a certain amount of actual manipulation of President Trump here by some in the federal government, maybe at the Pentagon. The argument went that if you want to get a new generation of warships, and look, the military in any given country want to have more kit, they want to have more, in the armory, then you say, we'll call it a Trump generation warship, and then the president will give it his personal imprimatur and push it to get done. There are other warships that have been in the pipeline for years and years and not got very far. Sarah.
Oh, me? Yes, absolutely. I mean, if you want Trump to sign off on anything, first of all, you have to add dollops of flattery and, preferably name it after him. And, it works every time. But to be fair to Trump in this regard, he was obsessed with with the apparently slightly tired-looking naval fleet back when he was president the first time round. And one thing about Trump, he's like a dog with a bone. He keeps coming back to the same issues again. So this has actually been an obsession of his for some time. But as you say, if you want Trump to do something, first of all, make sure you say it's going to benefit you personally, Mr. President.
Yeah, but are you suggesting, though, Sarah, that do you think it's possible that the president is more concerned with his legacy and monuments and so on than with keeping on the right side of American voters? Maybe aware that this is the last crack he gets at the White House.
Well, he hasn't admitted it is his last crack, or whenever he slightly hints that it might be, he starts to take it back because he doesn't want to be perceived as a lame duck.
Well, indeed.
I think all these monuments to himself show that this is what he's about. I mean, he's going to build a massive triumphal arch near the Lincoln Memorial. And if you don't think that's going to be called a Trump arch, I don't know what the hell it is going to be. So he is, really is magnifying Washington and everything he can lay his hands on. Now, whether a future president just dismantles all those names, I don't know. But Trump really, really wants to be remembered in history. The thing is, he's going to be anyway. He's been a massively consequential president, but he's acting like he owns America PLC, just as he owns the Trump Organization, and I think that's dangerous for him.
Josh and Joe.
It's just a bottomless pit of vanity, isn't it? I mean, the hope with Trump has always been that you by indulging his vanity and his quest for personal glory, you somehow let America along for the ride. So you build these battleships that are actually the latest cutting edge technology that you need to take on the massive Chinese naval fleet. And if the cost of that is sticking Trump's name on it and maybe taking it off again in 10 years' time, so be it. But I do think Sarah's got a point that, particularly in this second term, we're starting to see his own personal quest for vanity and his own personal peccadillos seem to take priority quite often ahead of what you might think are the national priorities. And I do think that he's starting to look quite decadent and out of touch here. You know, a lot of the sort of financial chicanery that's going on, the profiteering in and around him. There is a river of corruption running through Washington right now, and that's okay if the economy's booming and if people are making money, and you know the stock market's been going up because of AI stocks. But if the affordability crisis continues, if the stock market bubble deflates, if people get fed up with this sort of vast gulf between Trump's personal activity and their own economic and daily struggles, then I do think he runs into trouble. And he's obviously got the midterm elections coming up next year. That'll be an interesting test for where the American people are on this, because it is starting to look a bit sort of Caligula-esque, late-stage Roman Emperor.
And slightly, I mean, we have to be concerned about whether these things are going to be as erratic in their behaviour as he is. If they're named after him, we certainly don't want warships with nuclear weapons on them that are behaving erratically. But it's also interesting. This is a guy who wants a Nobel Peace Prize. Wants to go around talking about all of his being able to solve all these various conflicts, and yet is then going to invest a fortune in battleships, which is an interesting sort of, I suppose, sort of stance that he's taking about where he sees the future of where the US will be. Will there be significant future conflicts? Where's he going to go and take on? What's he going to go and take on next? And Josh, when you opened the show talking about reasons that we need to be cheerful, then the idea that he's preparing for some major conflict in the future is a pretty depressing thought.
Well, yeah,
particularly with nuclear weapons on board. So
reasons to be fearful, but the Navy's old motto is if you want peace, prepare for war. So there's a reason to build those ships.
I need to just chart this in. This has just popped up. It's a social media post by the president on Truth Social. He's talking about the business of replacing Jerome Powell as the chair of the Federal Reserve, the American Central Bank. The president has just said he wants the next chairman of the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates if the markets are doing well, adding, anybody that disagrees with me will never be the Fed chairman. So that basically, Sarah, that just slams a torpedo into any semblance of independence for the Fed. And the markets, they do want an independent Fed.
They do, but at the same time, the president's always had the power to appoint the chairman of the Fed. And the joke is that Trump appointed Jerome Powell and regretted it as soon as he did. So Powell's term is finally coming to an end, and any president would have the right to appoint a Fed chair that they approve of. But once in power, the Fed chair is expected to act independently.
Yeah.
And if this appointee, the replacement for Powell, doesn't, then we are into a new era where the president is pulling all the levers of power. And, we've seen again and again, he's accumulating power to himself. And the Fed has been one sort of beacon of independence. And this, you're right, might end. Same time, if the economy is not successful next year, well, in 2026, Trump's going to own that fully. So he has to hope that that it improves.
Well, he will, but it doesn't do a great deal for the reputation and stature of the next chairman of the Fed, does it? Because after this post, we know that Donald Trump wants to call the shots when it comes to the movement in American interest rates. Of course, we know that. But announcing anyone who disagrees will never be the Fed chairman just tells the markets that whatever the Federal Reserve chairman says when he gets there and when he speaks, the assumption will be that it's been run past the president and wouldn't be said without his approval.
Yeah, astonishing to think that the chairman of the Fed could be a ventriloquist for Trump.
Well, indeed. Look, we've got to wind things up now. We've got less than 4 minutes to go. I promised earlier on that I was going to ask all of you, and I do include you in the invitation, Sarah. Just pop us a prediction for the coming year, and maybe, if you can, top of your head, a moment of what has been an extraordinary year. I'll leave you for the last, and so you can have a little think about, because you'll have so many to choose from. But Josh, a moment from you, a moment that truly stands out over these past 12 months.
I think if we're talking politics, I'd go back to July and Rachel Reeves's tears in the Commons, which were obviously, I think that's one of those political pictures that will remain with us for many years to come. But it was also a critical political moment for this government, because it's when their welfare cuts went down and ended up being watered into insignificance. It was a moment of deep political weakness, and they've never really recovered from it. It meant they had to do lots of really unpopular things at the budget to make the books balance, but it also has led to sort of persistent leadership speculation and a sense that the centre is weak. We were just talking about the farming inheritance tax being watered down as well. I think everything in some ways is downstream of that moment, and those tears sort of crystallised it so symbolically in the Commons.
It's a really well chosen moment. Joe, what would yours be?
Well, I would have gone for the rebellion the day before those tears. But if we're going for another moment, I would probably say the Zelensky visit and the bullying in the White House, which was just that moment that we were all sort of aghast at not only the treatment of President Zelensky, but then also what it meant for this sort of coalition of the willing and the group that sort of mobilised as a result of what's been going on in Ukraine. So as a sort of big moment of just perhaps when I think Trump and Vance actually just misjudged the way to behave, I think it was a pretty seismic moment for people around the globe.
So, Sarah, would you pick on I mean, goodness knows, looking at American politics, you have a few to choose from. What would you pick out in particular?
Well, I'm going to pick something that sounds silly, but actually isn't. It was that moment that Donald Trump went to the FIFA Club Football World Cup and was revealed to have thick cankles, those sort of very thick elderly person's ankles. And then, of course, there was the bruising on his hand. And it suddenly, after all those years of bashing Biden for being too old to be president, Donald Trump suddenly looked rather mortal. And next year, he's going to be 80 years old. He is he was already the oldest president to be elected in 2024. And he's going to celebrate his 80th birthday in the White House. How healthy is he? This was a surprise. It was a real revelation.
Okay.